There was a moment when the world almost chose the wrong brain. In 1968, two men walked away from power to build something no one fully understood. Today, that decision lives inside your laptop, your phone, your car, your future, and most people have no idea. How does a company that makes something you cannot see end up shaping everything you can? How does silicon become power? And more importantly, what happens when the company that builds the world's brains starts thinking for itself? This is not the story of a product. It is the story of control, of architecture, of invisible dominance. This is Intel. In the late 1960s, technology was loud. Massive machines, room-sized computers, government contracts, Cold War tension. Computers were not personal, they were institutional, and the people who built them were not dreaming about you. They were dreaming about supremacy. Robert Noyce, Gordon Moore, two men from Fairchild Semiconductor. Fairchild was powerful, profitable, dominant, but it was also rigid, political, slow, and innovators hate slow. So in 1968, they left. No guarantees, no safety net, just an idea. They wanted to shrink intelligence, not metaphorically, physically. They believed that computing power did not belong in government buildings. It belonged everywhere. But here's the thing. No one was asking for smaller computers. The market didn't exist. They were building a future that had no buyers. Intel did not start with CPUs. It started with memory chips, because memory sold. Memory was predictable, memory was safe. But deep inside the company, there was another obsession. A single chip that could process instructions, not store them, execute them. In 1971, Intel introduced the 4004, the first commercial microprocessor. At the time, almost no one noticed. There were no launch events, no headlines, no hype, just a quiet revolution. But revolutions don't announce themselves, they wait. Then something unexpected happened. A small company called IBM needed a brain. They were building a personal computer, a risky product, a strange idea, a computer for regular people. IBM had power, but it did not have speed. Intel had speed, but it did not have dominance. So they made a deal. The 8088 processor inside the IBM PC. And in that moment, Intel stopped being a supplier. It became a standard, and standards are more powerful than products. Because once the world builds around you, it cannot easily remove you. But there was a flaw. IBM controlled the brand. Microsoft controlled the operating system. Intel controlled the brain. 3 companies, 1 machine. And none of them fully trusted the others. What happens when the brain realizes it might not be in control? Because the 1980s were coming, and Intel was about to learn that building the world's intelligence is far easier than protecting it. Intel will face something more dangerous than competition. It will face invisibility. And in a world obsessed with brands, being invisible is fatal. In the early 1980s, something strange was happening. Millions of people were buying personal computers. They knew the brand on the box, IBM. They knew the software inside, Microsoft. But they had no idea who built the brain. Intel was everywhere and nowhere. It powered the machine, but received none of the credit. And in business, invisibility is not humility, it is weakness. Because if no one knows you matter, you can be replaced. And someone was watching. A MD, a company willing to copy, willing to compete, willing to undercut. Intel had built the architecture of the future, but it had not built emotional loyalty, and that mistake was about to become dangerous. Then Intel did something no chip company had ever done. It went to television, not engineers, not developers, consumers. In 1991, 3 words appeared on screens across America: Intel Inside. It was subtle, a small sticker, a quiet jingle. But psychologically, it was genius. Because now, when someone bought a computer, they were not just buying IBM, they were buying Intel. For the first time in history, the invisible brain had a face, and something shifted. Mothers, students, office managers, they began asking, does it have Intel inside? Not because they understood microarchitecture, but because they understood safety. Intel had turned silicon into trust. Through the 1990s, Intel was unstoppable. Pentium processors became symbols of speed. Moore's Law, the prediction that computing power would double every 2 years, became prophecy. And Intel became its high priest. Factories expanded, revenue exploded, engineers became kings. Inside the company, there was a belief, not arrogance, certainty, that they were not following the future. They were building it. But certainty has a shadow. Because when you believe you define reality, you stop preparing for disruption. And disruption never announces itself politely. In 1994, a math professor noticed something strange, a tiny flaw, a decimal error, deep inside the Pentium processor. To most people, it didn't matter. To engineers, it was embarrassing. To Intel, it was catastrophic. At first, they dismissed it, minimized it, calculated the cost of replacement, and chose control over transparency. But this was the dawn of the internet. Information spread, public trust cracked. For the first time, Intel looked vulnerable, not because the chip was weak, but because the response was. And that moment changed the company. They replaced millions of chips, took the financial hit, and learned a brutal lesson. When you are the brain of the world, mistakes are amplified. And while Intel was recovering, AMD was evolving, not copying, competing. Faster clocks, lower prices, aggressive positioning. For the first time, Intel wasn't untouchable, it was pressured, and pressure changes culture. Inside Intel, speed became obsession. Deadlines tightened, margins narrowed, innovation accelerated. But somewhere in that acceleration, something else began to happen. The world was changing. Computers were shrinking. Phones were becoming powerful. And the future of computing was no longer sitting on a desk. It was about to fit in your pocket. And Intel didn't see it coming. A different company was perfecting mobility. And when the smartphone revolution exploded, the company that built the world's brains was suddenly left outside the body. We enter the era Intel almost lost everything. The revolution Intel ignored. The early 2000s felt safe. Desktops were powerful. Laptops were dominant. Servers were expanding. Intel ruled them all. But revolutions rarely attack where you are strongest. They begin where you are comfortable. In 2007, a device appeared. It did not look like a computer. It did not sound like a computer. It did not need a fan. It did not need Intel. The iPhone, a new kind of machine. Small, battery-powered, always connected. And inside it was not an Intel chip. It was ARM architecture, efficient, cool, mobile. Everything Intel wasn't built for. At first, Intel dismissed it. Phones were toys. Serious computing lived on desks. But computing was moving, and Intel was standing still. This was not just competition, it was philosophy. Intel believed in power through performance. ARM believed in power through efficiency. Intel chips were race cars. ARM chips were electric bikes. Quiet, lightweight, everywhere. And as smartphones exploded globally, billions of devices began running without Intel. For the first time in decades, the future was scaling without them. Not because Intel lacked intelligence, but because it lacked humility. It had mastered one world and underestimated the next. The manufacturing trap Intel had something no one else had: its own factories, massive advanced fabrication plants. It designed the chips and built them. This vertical integration had been its superpower, but in a changing world, it became a burden. Companies like Apple designed chips, but outsourced manufacturing to TSMC. Flexible, faster, leaner. Intel's factories were expensive, slow to pivot, locked into legacy processes, and as chip sizes shrank to 10 nanometers, Intel stumbled, deadlines slipped, delays mounted, investors questioned, competitors advanced. The company that defined Moore's Law was struggling to keep up with it. Then came the moment. Apple made a decision. It would no longer rely on Intel processors for its Mac computers. It would build its own silicon, Apple Silicon, the M1 chip. And when it launched, it wasn't just competitive, it was superior. Faster performance, lower power consumption, silent machines, and suddenly, the company that once needed Intel had evolved beyond it. This was more than lost revenue, it was symbolic. The student had surpassed the teacher, and the world noticed. Identity crisis. Inside Intel, something shifted. For decades, they were the architects. Now, they were reacting. New leadership stepped in, promises of revival, investment in new fabs, ambitious roadmaps. But confidence is fragile, and reputation, once cracked, does not instantly repair. The question was no longer, can Intel build powerful chips? It was, can Intel rebuild belief? Because technology companies survive on innovation, but empires survive on narrative. And Intel's narrative was fading. Yet history has a pattern. The companies that fall hardest sometimes rise strongest if they remember who they were or redefine who they must become. And Intel was about to attempt its most dangerous move yet. Not dominance, not speed. Reinvention. Intel will attempt to reclaim the future. New factories, new strategy. A gamble worth billions. But the real question isn't whether Intel can win again. It's whether the world still needs the company that taught it to think. The comeback gamble. When companies fall, they usually shrink. They cut costs. They retreat. They protect what remains. Intel chose the opposite. It decided to expand. Billions of dollars poured into new fabrication plants. Arizona, Ohio, Europe. Factories not just for Intel chips, but for other companies. A radical shift. Intel would no longer only design and build for itself. It would become a foundry, a manufacturer for rivals, a builder of infrastructure. It was an admission. The old model was gone. The future required partnership. But rebuild and manufacturing dominance is not a press release. It is physics, chemistry, time. And time is ruthless. By the 2020s, something else had changed. Chips were no longer just products. They were power. Nations realized that whoever controlled semiconductor production controlled the future. Artificial intelligence, military systems, economic stability. Silicon became strategy. Governments stepped in, subsidies, legislation, national security policies. The CHIPS Act in the United States signaled something profound. Semiconductors were no longer a market story. They were a sovereignty story. And Intel, once just a company, became a geopolitical asset. But with that came pressure. When you are essential to national security, failure is not an option. And then came another revolution. Artificial intelligence. Data centers expanded, neural networks scaled, compute demand exploded. NVIDIA surged ahead in AI acceleration. New architectures emerged. New players gained relevance. Intel, once again, faced the same haunting question. Can the architect adapt to a new blueprint? The company invested in AI chips, in accelerators, in software ecosystems. But speed matters. And in technology, second place often feels invisible. The irony was painful. The company that defined computing performance was now chasing it. Yet beneath the headlines, something remains undeniable. Every major computing revolution of the last half-century carries Intel's fingerprints. Personal computing, enterprise servers, cloud infrastructure. Entire industries grew on its silicon. Entire careers were built on its standards. Moore's law was not just a prediction, it was a promise. And for decades, Intel kept that promise. The question is not whether Intel mattered, it is whether it still will. For empires are rarely destroyed by enemies alone. They are undone by momentum, by assumptions, by believing the future will resemble the past. Intel's story is not simply about chips, it is about scale, about how dominance can blind, about how innovation must constantly reinvent itself. Because building the world's brain is not a one-time achievement. It is a responsibility, and responsibility does not disappear when markets shift. It becomes heavier. In 1968, two men believed intelligence could be compressed, that silicon could hold logic, that machines could think faster than humans. They were right, but perhaps the deeper question was never about machines. It was about us. What happens when the tools we build begin shaping the world faster than we can adapt? Intel taught the world to think in binary, 0, 1, on, off. But the future is not binary, it is uncertain. And somewhere, inside a laboratory, inside a factory, inside a processor being etched at atomic scale, the next decision is being made, not just about speed, not just about efficiency, but about direction. Because the companies that build the brain do not just process information, they shape possibility. And whether Intel rises again or becomes a chapter in history, one truth remains. The world still runs on silicon, and somewhere inside it, Intel is still thinking.